Hello everyone and welcome down to episode number 13 of the Down South Photo Show. It's great to be back in your faces, in your ears, wherever you're listening, whatever you're doing. If you're watching us on YouTube, hello everyone out there. Hello to everyone who listens to us on the podcast via Podbean and all your other places where you listen to your podcasts. And it is my great pleasure to say hello once again to my great mate Cameron Blake down in Tasmania. G'day, Cam.
G'day, Brendan. How you going?
I nearly ran out of breath then. Did you forget my name?
No, I'm still getting over in your face and in your ears.
Well, that's what we are.
Yeah, I know, but you take that too far and we're in trouble.
It's where we are.
It is. It's lovely. How you going?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Like the Mighty Demons, we had a week off, so we're feeling fit and fresh and ready to go, which sort of... This goes out Friday night, so...
Are you playing Friday night?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So a lot of you already know what's happened.
Yes.
But it's footy, folks. I mean,
make sure you put in the comment. Make sure you put the score in the comments for Brendan to either relive his nightmare or his greatest day so far.
Do you know what? It'll be what it'll be.
That's it, mate. You can't change the future.
No.
And you can't change the past. You can only just hope for the best.
You hit your wagon to these clubs, mate, and they do your head in, and mine in particular. Now, speaking of subscribers on YouTube and things like that, we are hovering around the 180 subscriber mark now, which is awesome. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, was never our goal to gain subscribers and stuff. It's just a really cool sort of measure that we've got. So we can see that people are enjoying the show and are subscribing to the channel. We also love comments under our videos as well. So
we do like the comments. They sort of egg us on a bit more, don't they? What people write there, and and 180 subscribers or so. Maybe it might be more by the time it comes out, but that's awesome. If we smash 200, that's 199 more than I thought we'd get. So
does that include the both of us? Or
well, I was never going to subscribe.
Oh, true. Yeah, that's right.
But that's great. And I thank everyone for tuning in and watching. It's great. Yeah, it's getting out there. It's good.
And I'd like to give a special shout out to Will Shipton from Inside Imaging for plugging our podcast /show on his newsletter this week, which was a pleasant surprise. So thank you, Will, for doing that for us.
That was pretty cool, wasn't it?
It was nice. I think we got one extra subscriber out of that.
Well, that's because it's only just come out today, I think, and once we shared it around our socials, so people will go and read, and they'll think, geez, these guys must be good. They've got a write-up. So
that's right.
They'll subscribe, and the journey will begin for them.
It validates our efforts.
It does. I've just, as I mentioned before we got on air here, I've just been having a chat with some customers who are due to come on the Franklin River rafting photo trip with me in November, and just having a chat about how that's going to work being in Melbourne and things. But one of the beautiful ladies there who's coming along, it's like, she goes, I've still got so many shows to go. She goes, I'm only halfway through and you guys just keep chewing them out. I'm like, well, you got to keep up. So good luck to you, Joe.
Yeah,
and Nina.
We've had plenty of time to be able to do it. Me in particular, being I think at least half of these shows have been recorded in lockdown. So
they have.
and this is recorded on Wednesday night, and we got the good news today that regional Victoria will be coming out of lockdown as of 11:59 p.m. tomorrow night. So come Friday, we'll be in a very fortunate position to be able to reopen the 2 camera and photo stores, which is needed. I
feel like we've had this sentence conversation before.
Yeah, it has got a very deja vu.
Very, very similar ring to that. We're very fortunate to be able to open tomorrow, and let's hope it all goes well. And then the next week,
the record so far I think is 4 days. We lasted before, so you get a sense though with everything that's going on, there is light at the end of the tunnel now. Sort of targets have been set, the vaccination targets have been set, and I think we all needed that. We all needed to see, all right, what are we actually aiming for here?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it just goes on, and no one really knew. So hang tough, everyone, particularly my mates in Melbourne that I know are battling hard through lockdown, and of course everyone in Sydney as well, Canberra.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing it pretty tough. So hang in there, guys.
We'll
As I say, light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, that's right. Very true.
Yeah, so we've got a few topics to cover off tonight. We're going to feature our Dear Cam segment later on as well, so stay tuned for that.
Excellent.
Dear Cam is back with a vengeance. We are going to talk about my continued and at times fruitless search for a new camera.
Well, I'm hearing it's be getting a bit closer to a end point. Maybe there's some news.
Speaking of setting targets and goals and things, yes, that's right.
Very good.
Things are getting closer on that front as well.
Yeah.
But Cam suggested this week that we might have a little chat about using the different modes that your camera can take landscape photos in.
Yeah.
And so I sort of put that as is manual really the holy grail for landscape photography? And I'm going to let Cam open the discussion on this because I reckon he is cocked and loaded.
I am cocked and loaded, and the reason I'm cocked and loaded is because this topic comes up at almost every first day of a workshop I've ever run, is what mode should I be shooting in? I've just recently come back from the Tarkine, did a workshop up there, which we were lucky enough to be able to run. And we had this conversation up there. I've had this conversation online with people today. It's something that comes up all the time in landscape photography, and there's this underlying sort of idea that, to be able to shoot really nice landscape photography, you have to be shooting in manual mode, and manual mode only. There's no compromising. You can't shoot in aperture priority. You can't shoot in shutter priority. You certainly can't shoot in program. And what's the point of even shooting in auto? And I sort of scoff at that. I think, and I think it comes back to maybe it's partly probably our fault, Breens, when we worked in camera shops, that we worked with people, and people when they sold cameras, like, if you want to be professional, you got to shoot in full manual. And I don't buy into that at all. Never have. The only time I'll put my camera into manual mode is if I'm doing astro, where you need to sort of overwrite everything on the camera and tell it what it needs to do. But for 99% of my shots for landscape photography, I shoot everything in aperture mode. And the reason I shoot aperture priority, which is either A on your dial or AV, depending on which brand you use. And the reason I shoot in aperture priority is landscape photography. It's all really about controlling your depth of focus from the front of your frame to the back of your frame, and how much of that sharpness you want through your scene. And aperture controls that. That's what aperture does. It controls your depth of field. So the trap that I find people who shoot in manual mode all the time is, and I do it as a bit of a test, so this is a bit of a secret that people are just going to know now when they come on my workshops, is I'll sit back in the first couple of hours of the workshop and just see how everyone else shoots and how they do their thing and how they set up. And so many times you'll get their camera to be in M mode. It'd be, for example, the scene behind me, a big massive mountain range with huge depth through the scene, and they'll be on f5.6 or f7.1 or some obscure aperture down the wide open end of the aperture. And the question always is, why are we shooting a huge landscape scene with lots of depth we want at f5 or f5.6 or f7? Why are we not shooting a bit further up the scale where we get a bit more of that depth of field? And the answer is, well, I'm on manual mode. I was just trying to get the needle balanced in the middle for the exposure. So they're changing all these settings without actually knowing what the settings are doing. And I think that's a really bad habit to get into when you're shooting landscape or any photography. If you're changing settings without knowing why you're doing it, then you may as well be shooting in auto mode.
Yeah, so you might be, similar to me in terms of the style you've developed over the years. And for me, it's always about the end result, right? And you work backwards from there. So rather than saying, I've heard that you have to shoot in manual to get X, Y, and Z. So now, hang on a minute, you're shooting landscape. So what you need to know is that for the majority of landscape photos, as you say, like the one behind you, like the one behind me, you're going to want pretty much everything in focus from your feet to that horizon. Yeah. So, and working in manual mode, as far as I'm concerned, has its own pitfalls insofar as there's a lot of information there and a lot to work with. If you can take out one of those parameters, for example, as you say, using aperture priority, which I would shoot similar to you, 80-90% of my landscapes are shot on aperture priority.
Yeah.
If you can take that out of the equation, then you start to focus on what you should be focusing on, and that's composition. So,
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing, like I find people when they're shooting it, and I guess this is more suited for people that are maybe starting out or enthusiasts, not necessarily talking about, the more professional photographers that might be listening. Having said that though, I cringe, or inside I cringe, but when you will see something pop up online, photo that someone's put up, and it might be a quite respected professional photographer, and they'll put up a shot and it's, a massive landscape shot on, 6.3. It's like, why are you shooting on 6.3? And to me, it's not, they haven't chosen 6.3 as an aperture. That's where they've landed when they're marrying everything else up in that manual mode. So this is probably more directed at people that are beginners or enthusiasts who have been shooting on manual mode but still having a bit of an issue. And what I find is those people at that skill level, they get buried in the back of their camera trying to figure out what every one of those settings does. And exactly like you said, they have paid no attention to the composition. By the time they get their settings right, they're either using the wrong aperture for the depth of field they want, the light's gone, the moment's gone, they get frustrated. And that's why people get really frustrated using manual mode as well.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to understanding aperture priority and understanding shutter priority and knowing what those two things can do for you. It's a really good starting point, and my entry-level beginner workshops kick off that way pretty much, where we look at the mode dial and we say, okay, program, shutter, aperture, this is what they will do for you. And conversely, on the other side of the coin is if we get a lot of people who are really keen to shoot portraits. Yes, I know this is basically a landscape photography show podcast, but when people want to shoot portraits, all they really want is really shallow depth of field, or as you call it, depth of focus. And I love that you call it depth of focus, because even the phrase depth of field throws people out. It's not a commonly used phrase, right? So you get beginners like, depth of field, what the hell are you talking about? We're shooting wheat fields now.
What's a field?
That's right. Whereas it should I prefer to call it depth of focus for sure. And understanding that aperture rules when it comes to depth of field, so depth of focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And saying that, exactly what you're saying about portrait photography, we do things on the trips I go on, and every trip you go, someone's like, how do you shoot portrait? There's always a question about how do you shoot something else. As far as I'm concerned, if you understand the settings, and if you can shoot a model on the jetty behind you and get a really nice soft depth of focus on the background or depth of field and really make that model stand out, you can shoot a beautiful old tree in a forest that stands out from the rest of the forest. You can shoot these beautiful grass reeds on a coastline. You can actually incorporate the exact same settings across every genre of photography, as long as you understand what they do. It's when you don't understand what Aperture's doing, and Aperture's the one that does people's head in. Every time they're like, I don't understand the numbers, I don't get what they are. I dumb it down as much as I can. I use 3 apertures across my entire series of work. It's either wide open, f16, or if I'm being lazy, I'll shoot in the middle somewhere. And people, as soon as people stop getting lost in the numbers of aperture but paying more attention to what the aperture means, the quicker you'll get to a better level of photography.
Yeah, so a real quick sort of Aperture 101, and this is the thing that annoys me a lot about photography, is if I had a time machine, I could go back to the people that were talking about setting up, and I understand it's all to do with algorithms and it's all to do with the mathematical formula about aperture. The lower the number, the wider the hole.
Yep.
I mean, that still trips me up.
Yep.
And I've been doing this forever, and you talk to kids that have come out of photography college, and you can see them stopping and
photography. See, I was going to say, photography to me, how you used to rub your head and tap your tummy.
Yeah.
It's like that. The one thing I give my tips to my guests is with aperture. The one I find it's easier: big aperture number, big focus. Small number, small focus. Yep. So it takes the whole diameter of the aperture and it being opposite to what the number sort of is.
Yeah. And
all they do is like, okay, well, I want lots of focus, big number. I want little focus, little number. Yeah. I think you can dumb down photography real easily. So go back to that KISS phrase, keep it simple, stupid. You don't need to overcomplicate things. There's enough going on around you with light and compositions and leading lines and tripods from other people getting in front of you, all the things that we've spoken about. You don't need to overcomplicate it by going into manual mode. And I think on the flip side of that as well, I get a lot of people sort of look at me and they say, oh, you're a professional photographer, but you shoot aperture priority. Like, isn't that sort of cheating? Like, aren't you sort of shooting mostly auto then? I'm like, no, I'm prioritizing the aperture I want and letting the camera do the rest. Yep. Like it's not cheating. It's understanding the system better.
I've never understood the whole you're cheating.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
No, I'm actually using the tool the way it was designed.
That's right.
To deliver the result that I'm desiring.
Yeah, that's right. And that rolls into, and we probably won't get into in this episode, but that conversation always then rolls into metering modes and how the metering modes work. And they're like, well, what do you mean my camera doesn't give me the right metering straight away? Like, isn't that what the camera's controlling and meant to be doing? Like, why do I need to adjust my exposure after the camera's told me what it thinks it is? Like, there's so many things, and I say it a lot, is that the camera is the smartest dumb tool you have. It's a super smart machine, but if you don't know what you're doing with it, it may as well be a brick on a tripod, because
they're like computers, mate. They're only as smart as the people who use them. So
exactly, yeah, exactly.
And you're exactly right. I think people do, when they particularly new, if you've got a new camera or you're new to the game of particularly SLR photography, there's so much. There's so much in the menu. You see people, they get their camera out and they turn on the menu. Now, if you look at a menu for a Canon, a Canon 5D Mark III, Mark IV, you turn on
it's about that thick,
mate. On the back, when you go to the menu, there's like 14 tabs, and each one of them has got 25 different options within it.
Here's a snap poll for you. Snap poll. We haven't spoken about this. The worst menu system on which brand of camera is? I'm putting mine out there is Nikon.
Yeah,
I cannot get my head around Nikon menus.
Now you say we haven't talked about it. We actually did bring this up in the live show last week, 2 weeks ago. Yeah,
right. Okay.
And we might have done it off air. I don't know. Maybe. But for me, almost without exception, it used to be Pentax.
Right.
That menu, my goodness, like so bad. But lately, it's more Panasonic.
Panachronic. Yep.
Yeah, hard to remember. Because I'm so used to Nikon, Canon, Olympus, Sony users, then someone throws the curveball at me.
Yeah.
Oh, Brendan, how do I change the white balance? I'm like, can you give me a minute?
I do the same. That's exactly what I do on my workshop. So I'll rock up and you'll have an idea of what everyone's using. And as soon as I see the Nikon, I'm like, oh no, don't ask me how to change focus points, or don't ask me this, don't ask me. Anyway, we're going off topic a bit there, but but getting back to these manual modes, I think to sort of get a point across that there's nothing that you need to worry about when you're shooting your camera. You don't need to be shooting in manual mode to think. If you think that's going to advance your photography quicker and get you results quicker, in my experience, you're 100% wrong. You need to, unless you really understand exactly what every single part of that manual mode is doing, you're better off starting in an aperture priority mode or shutter priority mode, even program mode, just to get an idea of what everything does. But using manual mode out of the box, it's like it's like giving to someone like a 20-speed semi-trailer and telling them to go through peak hour.
You're exactly right. And as I say, I see it a lot, but there's just this myth around manual mode. But as I say,
but I think that's our fault. I think that's retail's fault.
Yeah,
because I think retail. Like, I remember when I used to sell cameras with you, and not necessarily you, but you hear other people and they like, it has full manual mode, and people just get excited. Like, it's like, that's how I become a professional. I've got to shoot full manual. Yep, there you go. Hand over your thousands of dollars, get into manual mode, you're set.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll probably tap the brakes a fraction on that and say that manual mode has its place, but it really has its place for very experienced photographers. See, I know photographers who could walk into a room or they're in a scene and they go F8, 1/2/5 at 400 ISO will get me the exact. They can talk in the numbers and what was that movie, A Beautiful Mind? You could see the numbers. There are people like that, but mate, they're people who've been in the game for 40 years. Yeah. Old buggers like us. It's not these these younger kids who grab the camera and manual mode, great. Let's just go straight for manual mode because that's how I become a pro. So you're exactly right. And
I think the other thing, classic example is like what I've got here. Like these cameras, the old Olympus cameras, they were practically all manual. So there is a time and an age where you were manually doing everything, manually adjusting everything, and matching the needle up in your camera. And I think that's also where people can get a little bit sort of lost at, like, well, that's how I used to use my old camera, or that's how the old one used to be, so I want to try and use this digital camera the same way.
Well, which brings us to the point, and that is with the digital revolution, and being able to control so much more and having way more scope in your image now, which will sort of lead us on to a topic we're going to talk about a little bit later on, and that's the topic of dynamic range.
Yeah.
And now that your camera has the ability to see detail in highlights and shadows like never before, far better than film ever could. I think you were telling me before, film has a dynamic range of 5 stops.
Yeah, the different films. Yeah, different films had different dynamic ranges. For example, good old, look at that. There's a blast from the past. The Fuji Velvia 100F.
Love it.
So slide film or E6 film generally had around about sort of 5 stops of dynamic range.
As a complete aside, I love the smell of film.
I love the smell of chemicals that they develop. Not like, when you go in the dark room. I think it was the fixer.
No. I have never been in a dark room.
Really? Okay. Well, in a dark room, you've got developer, stop bath, and fixer, right?
Yep. And I know what's in there. I've just never been in one.
It smells like salt. It smells like salt and vinegar chips.
Okay. Well, see, that's what I reckon film smells a bit like as well.
It's all about the same, but yeah. So, but this kind of E6 or slide film, as commonly known, has 5 stops of dynamic range. Your normal C41 negative has around about 7 or 8 stops, and your black and white, depending on which black and white you had around about sort of 8 or 9 stops. Well, we've got digital cameras now that go sort of 14, pushing 15 stops.
Yeah.
So that's 3 times as much dynamic range as that, which, like I said, it takes us into another topic. But
so for those who haven't heard the phrase dynamic range before, it's basically, as I say, it's your camera's ability to see detail in highlights and shadows at the same time. A good example of that is, for example, if you take a photo, let's say in your living room on a bright sunny day, and you've got the shutter, your curtains open, quite often you'll take a photo and all you see outside is white. There's no detail there at all. Well, the dynamic range comes back to your ability to be able to pull that detail back in processing down the track. So, for example, if you shoot a RAW file and you shoot that image, you can then use your sliders in the RAW editor to be able to bring the detail back. It'll be there. Earlier digital cameras did a lot of what we called highlight clipping, where basically the highlights were gone and were gone forever. You'd never be able to get that back. But nowadays, as Cam was saying, cameras are pushing 14, 15 stops of dynamic range. Yeah. That data is certainly there, and you can actually isolate parts of your photo and pull back that data so that the detail in your shadows and your highlights can be balanced out a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's... again, that's something else that
Was that a terrible explanation of dynamic range?
No, that's pretty good. No, that's pretty good.
All right.
And then I guess from there, the other thing that sort of trips people up a bit is the histogram on the back of their camera. Yes. So on the back of your camera, most modern digital cameras, you'll have a little graph that sort of looks like a little bar graph or a little sketch graph on the back of your camera when you take a photo. And what that is, it is a scientific readout of what your dynamic range or what the exposure parameters that your camera can capture are, and that's a direct output of what your highlights and shadows are doing in each shot. And it's really important to understand how that works, because if you don't understand how that works, you get a lot of people that, again, what Brendan said about blowing out highlights. So you overexpose too much. So for people at home who can see my screen, the sun in the very top corner of my shot is blown out. There's no detail in there. But by adjusting your exposure and playing around with the exposure of your shot, you can actually rescue this, and as Brendan said, when you get into post, you can start isolating certain parts of that, and you can paint exposure back in or take it out, whichever way you want to do it. But I get a lot of conversations around dynamic range because people look at the shots and go, "Oh, that must be a composition, or you must have bracketed, or you've done a high dynamic range or a HDR shot. How did you get all that detail in your shot?" And most of the cameras these days, if you're shooting early morning, late afternoon, the dynamic range is really quite low in that scene. It's not a massive, like Brendan said, it's not a huge variance from shadows to inside and light outside in a house, for example. So you can actually get a lot of your exposure in one shot. You don't need to necessarily bracket or HDR or drop in filters or whatever. The cameras are pretty amazing these days if you just get the timing right.
Yeah, that's right. And all those techniques that you just spoke of certainly do have their place for certain scenarios. For example, I find it a bit fruitless focus stacking landscapes when, as you say, you can just shoot at f8, f11 to get what you want. However, if you are doing a bouquet of flowers on a desktop and you want to be able to, get great greater depth of field, but you're working in low light, sure, that's where focus stacking all of a sudden becomes really useful.
Yeah.
So we'll probably dedicate a whole other episode to focus stacking. I've never actually attempted focus stacking. Have you?
I've done a little bit. It works really well with macro, like you said, macro flowers and bugs and things like that. But I don't use it too much. A lot of people use it in landscape, but I'm with you. Like, you can sort of get that same depth of field and stuff going with the right aperture.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just trying to think of a scenario where I would want to use it. And the thing that springs to mind for me, for example, I'm getting into, not at the moment because I can't go anywhere, but I'm getting into a bit of golf course photography. I was going to say, you're not breaking the law, eh? No, I'm getting into a bit of golf course photography, and the only scenario I can see where you would want that separation, for example, if you've got a beautiful green with the flag, and then then you've got the background like a lake or something behind. Maybe focus stacking would help you to, you could do 2 exposures at lower aperture values and have your flag and then the background, but no middle distance. That can be quite effective, and that's where focus stack. Sure, that's fine, but that's an exception to the rule.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of the cameras these days, they do a lot of in-camera focus stacking. You can do lots of things in camera, like even ISO stacking, exposure stacking. You can do lots of different things in camera, but to me, dynamic range is a really important one to understand. That if you understand where you're coming from an exposure value, understanding your histogram and how that works, if you get it right in camera, getting your edits done is a hell of a lot easier than trying to make a photo out of something that you've not taken properly, as opposed to just polishing up a photo that's done properly. So I'm a huge believer of getting it right in camera, and that's where a lot of my shots I'm underexposing most of the time in landscape photography, because most of your landscapes, like your sky behind you, is like that sky is the shot, that's the killer of the shot there. The sun rays behind my shot there, that's the real hero of the shot. If you lose that detail by overexposing or exposing incorrectly, the file's not going to recover anywhere near as much as if it had the detail to start with. So I use a pretty simple standard for my stuff. I usually have my exposure compensation set to -1, so 1 stop under as a starting point, and then go from there. Different if sometimes, again, if you're shooting high key scenes like lots of snow or lots of sand, you might push it back up a bit. But again, I try and teach it's all about making it as simple as possible. So like you said, exactly, your point was so spot on before, that you can spend all your time looking out at your scene and less time looking at the back of your camera. That's the key.
I completely agree. And I think it's really important when you're in the field to be able to get your settings set up and right quickly, and then spend all of your time finding those compositions. There's a few photographers that I follow on YouTube, and one of them is Photo Tripper. I don't know if you know.
I was watching some of his stuff today. He's very funny.
I was just about to say he's a pisser. He is a pisser. He's a funny.
I reckon we should tag him. Some of his stuff's really cool. But when he's taking photos, you can tell he gets the settings right. He puts it on a tripod. He locks it off, and then he lets the light come. And then as the light's changing, all he's doing is triggering the camera. That's all he's doing. He's just there, bang. So that scene behind you, for example, is probably a bit more of a dynamic scene than is behind me. You can see that the light would have been shifting around really quickly. The way it's picked up those creases in the mountain range and all that sort of stuff. So, and you got the clouds. I was trying not to vomit. I was trying not to vomit as the plane bounced through turbulence.
Oh, you're in a plane there.
That's a plane shot. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. I was in the clouds. We were flying back, dodging turbulence.
Yeah. But what I'm getting at, this guy Photo Tripper, look him up on YouTube. We'll put a link below. He's got a phenomenal gallery of work. Like his images are brilliant. The fact that he's based out of Vancouver Island in British Columbia,
does help.
It does. So he's got these amazing landscapes that he can just literally get in his car and go off in any direction and hit a brilliant landscape. But again, you can see he's He's experienced. He doesn't necessarily shoot always in manual mode, although he does
Sorry,
from time to
coughing on you.
time. That's fine, mate. He shoots mainly. He shoots in all different modes, but he does quite a bit of long exposure stuff, but without filters because he operates in low light.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
and that's where I find as well, like, you don't need all these filters and tools on your camera. If you just wait for the light with a circular polarizer, that's about as much as you need.
Yep.
And generally works a treat that way.
Yeah. Well, you've said from the get-go that a circular polarizer is pretty much your weapon of choice when it comes to a filter.
Yeah.
Is that more because of the color enhancement properties it gives you, or the fact that it does just cut through the glare?
It's probably that and another one. So again, it helps increase the contrast and gives you those true polarized colors. So especially in forests, a lot of people don't use them in forests, but you get that pure green color coming off instead of the reflective light off the leaves. You get the pure green.
It looks nuts, doesn't it? It looks so good,
and it's so obvious. As soon as you turn it, people just go, "Wow, I've never even noticed that."
Yeah.
So that's one reason. The other thing I like it for is it's practically a 2-stop neutral density. So it actually drops your exposure down by 2 stops. So you're getting late in the day or early morning when you're starting off. You don't need to be stacking 10 stops and 6 stops on the front. You can still get especially waterfalls and coastal shots. A 2-stop neutral density at an early morning or a late afternoon, you're still going to get a fairly slow sort of type of shot. So I think that
how the hell do these photographers who use filters carry the bloody things around and keep them clean?
I don't know. I've got a really funny story, and she's going to hate me for it, but we'll tell you anyway. Thank you. Just got my beautiful assistant to get me some more water because coughing a bit more than I needed to be.
That's right. Your hay fever kicked in this week, didn't it?
It did kick in down here in Tassie, and I got told not to say this by people I was talking to before, but I was out and about, and they said, "Don't tell us you've been out and about. That's not fair." I was out and about up in the northeast, and it's just, as far as the eye can see, it is yellow wattle trees everywhere. And I don't usually get hay fever, and I came home, I felt like I'd been hit by a bus, and I didn't have a runny nose, but my throat was scratchy, and I've been coughing and carrying on. So I'm getting over it, but I apologise for the coughing. But
today's episode brought to you by Zyrtec.
Another sponsor. We could just keep listing it. Anyway, so there's a lovely, lovely photographer. Her name is Chrystal. She lives in Queensland. She's an incredible photographer. Midnight Photography is her handle. We used to do workshops together down here in Cradle Mountain a couple of years ago, and she used to be part of the Nissi crew, so she used to be an ambassador for Nissi. And we had this beautiful morning at Cradle Mountain, so everyone can picture Cradle Mountain, Dove Lake. It was not a cloud around, not a movement, not a breath of wind, nothing. All the button grass was frozen. It was just perfect. So we had the group all spread around. We're taking photos, and you didn't need a filter. Maybe a circular polarizer. That was it. So we're all standing around this crystal clear, pristine location, and all of a sudden it sounded like someone had dropped a wine glass on a rock, and all we hear is this and she let the F word out. I'm like, what was that? And it was all echoing, like we were still hundreds of meters away from each other. I'm like, what was that? She goes, that was my 10 stop. It's $400 filter. I'm like, why are you using it? She goes, I don't know. And she'd dropped her filter on the rock. It's just because of the metal construction. It wasn't warped, but because it was so cold, the filter just slipped straight through. And she'd smashed it on the rocks. And that was a good point for the rest of the group. Like, one, you probably didn't need to be using a 10 stop because nothing needed to be blurred or slowed down. And two, she's just cost herself $400 in a filter.
Well, if there wasn't any movement, no wind or no running water or anything,
there was nothing. I think that was just a habit of what she was used to doing. So
lesson learned.
Lesson learned. It was a very funny morning. There's a lot to that story. I'll tell you off air, but that was a funny start to the day. But
we can't do that to our listeners, Cam. Okay, maybe we can. No, tell them. No, don't tell us anything.
Well, okay, we can. No, we can. It's not recognisable, and so we can. We won't get sued. Okay. So the same morning we had a guest who the day before had got a really, really nice shot down at the classic Cradle Mountain boathouse shot, and the rest of the group hadn't got as nice a shot as this lady had got, and she was very happy about the shot she got. It was lovely. She should have been very proud. And so that night before we had the next morning where Chrystal dropped her filter, we're all talking and we're like, okay, tomorrow the weather is looking great. It looks like it's going to be an absolute cracking start to the day. Tomorrow is the morning you don't want to miss at Cradle Mountain. And this customer's like, you know what? I've sort of got my shot for the weekend. I'm probably just going to sleep in if that's all right. And I'm like, oh, really? You sure? She's like, yeah, I'm going to sleep in. So she slept in. And it was probably I've been to Cradle Mountain thousands of times, and to this day, it was still probably the best start to the morning at Cradle Mountain I'd ever seen. So we all got up, she slept in, we came back to breakfast, she was waiting at the table for us at breakfast, and all the other guests just walked in, even on their phones, and just went, look at that. And her heart, you remember that Simpsons episode where Bart's heart breaks or whatever it is, and it goes in slow-mo? You could almost see her heart break in half that she slept in and missed one of the best mornings of all time. So, don't sleep. The moral of the story is, don't ever think you've got the best shot you can get.
Wow.
Because there's always a better one out there.
No, that would make your heart break.
Yeah, and then from that point onwards, she was like like a shadow. She didn't leave our side. She wanted to be everywhere we went to make sure she didn't miss another moment. So
yeah. No, I think it was. I think Lisa broke Ralph Wiggum's heart.
That's right. It was Ralph Wiggum's heart. I choose you. Wasn't that one?
And there's a picture of a cat on there.
Yeah.
No, a picture of a train on it.
That's right. Yeah.
For all
those people that grew up in the 90s.
I just mixed up the my cat's breath smells like cat food from the same episode.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway,
Simpsons references.
Yeah, great show.
So we went a bit all over the place talking about modes and all that sort of stuff. And the question was, is manual really the holy grail for landscape photography? I think we answered that in the negative.
Yeah. I'd say no. I just don't. Like again, this is more directed at beginners and enthusiasts, people that haven't maybe got their skills under control just yet. I would say if you're looking to advance your photography and do it in manual mode, it's going to be a longer road than if you're, especially landscape photography. We're all landscape. Yep. It's going to be a longer road to travel as opposed to shooting an aperture priority and understanding that bit more.
And the last point I will make is that photographers don't buy photography. So what I mean by that is, the person that I and you as well, we sell to, they actually probably don't know a lot about photography. And
they couldn't care less.
Exactly. So they're going to look at that photo and go, oh my God, you didn't shoot it on manual. I don't want it.
Yeah.
They couldn't care less.
They couldn't care less. So again, I guess you could look at that. If it's working, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you're getting manual mode and it's working for you, please don't go and change everything you're doing that's working just because a couple of old farts on here said you shouldn't shoot manual. If it's working for you, keep it up. If it's not, if it's still frustrating, try switching into aperture priority for a while and see how you go.
Yeah, and the reason I'm chuckling is because we're not old farts.
Well, we're not getting any younger. You're old.
There's plenty of people out there.
Hang on, we just referenced the 1992 Simpsons episode. We're pretty old, mate.
There's plenty of people out there doing what we do who are a lot older than us. So
yeah, but they shoot manual.
What would they know?
Yeah, well, they know exactly.
Right, moving right along. My search for a new camera continues, and the reason why I'm sort of not able to get my hands on it yet is because there ain't no stock. I'm not going to give it away yet. I'm not giving it away, but
no stock.
There's no stock of what I'm after.
Is this a newly released? Is this such a new camera that's been released? No,
not telling.
All right, so that's a great update. Thanks for that.
All right, I'll narrow the field for you. It's not a Panasonic.
Excellent. Okay. All right, we can rule out one model each week until you finally get it.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. So look, I've in my lockdown life, I've been looking around what's out there. I know what's out there. I know what I want, and I just, as I say at the moment, can't get my hands on it. Can't get my hands on the body nor the lens I want either. Right. God damn it! Which will be the initial lens I buy with this thing, which will be my landscape lens. Right. And it will be a very wide angle lens that I'm not very wide angle.
I guess
it'll be a very wide angle lens that I buy.
I guess you could say the search for your camera is over by the sound of it.
Oh yeah, I know what I want. I just got to get my hands on one.
Yeah, so the search is over. Now the mystery is as to what the choice is. Well, okay.
I don't think anyone cares, but anyway,
I do.
All will be revealed, if not next podcast, probably the one after that.
Well, because I'm worried because if it's a Nikon, I don't think we can continue this little podcast anymore. I don't think I could run. Oh, you've got to put it down. There is a Nikon right there on the front of the camera.
That's right.
What's that? D5000.
Do you know what? This is my.
Is this the one that's? Is this the one that's stapled to the front of the camera?
Yes. So this is my Nikon D5100,
Yep.
which is 487 years old. I got it when Jesus played fullback for Jerusalem, and it has got.
Is that the year he got rubbed out?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, when he bumped the umpire. When he bumped one of the apostles, I don't know. I was grasping really quickly.
You tried.
That's got my my awesome Sigma 10 to 20, and it's not even the f3.5 version. It's the f4 to 5.6. That thing has taken so many of my photos. It's ridiculous, and it's an absolute dinosaur. But I love it, and it's.
Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And it's not what you got, it's how you use it.
That's right. Absolutely.
Dear Cam.
Hey, here we go.
Dear Cam. It's time for our Dear Cam segment. Maybe we should get a...
we still haven't got any music for this, have we?
Yeah, we need a sting, like a little...
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. If you're creative enough to make a sting, we will use it. Dear Cam. This is short and sweet and refers back to what we've already been talking about tonight, so it's perfect.
Yeah.
Do you prefer ND filters over a two-shot or more Photoshop edit? This is Phil from Esperance. Esperance, there's a place. Let's all go to Esperance, everybody.
Is that WA?
Esperance is in southern Western Australia, on the doorstep to some amazing coastal national parks. And
right. Is that the Wine Valley down? What's that valley or the...
Margaret River is what you're...
Is that way? Is that Esperance way? Okay.
Well,
apologies to people from Esperance because I don't really know where it is.
Yeah, so Margaret River is... Well, how can I put this? Margaret River is to Perth like Ocean Grove is to Melbourne, whereas Esperance is more like Malakuta to Melbourne. Just to give you a local reference that you might understand.
Right, okay.
Esperance is miles away from Perth, like way down south.
I'm with you. And who is it? What's her name?
Phil.
Phil? Okay. So do
you prefer ND filters over a two-shot or more Photoshop edit?
No. No. I actually don't use ND filters physically at all, but I do use the graduated ND filter a fair bit in my Lightroom program. So again, this goes back to the dynamic range conversation, that if I've got all the information on that file in regards to the highlights especially, then as you said, you can bring that into your Lightroom or your Photoshop and you can play with, you can mask or layer or paint in certain parts of that information, because the information's there. Then you can take it out or put it back or make it better or worse. So the quick answer to that is no, I don't. But I know why people do. And especially speaking of Esperance, Christian Fletcher, who's a very well-known Australian landscape photographer who lives south of Perth, out that way as well. I actually purchased a few of his instructional videos a couple of years ago, and he does a lot of things with two stops, using two shots or bringing a sky in from another shot and marrying them in, and he does it exceptionally well. So horses for courses, it's not my cup of tea, and it's probably not my cup of tea because I don't really know how to do too much Photoshop stuff. But I'd rather, again, just get it right in camera. But I think if you're shooting at the right time of day and you're capturing the dynamic range and making sure you're not losing those details and highlights, you can practically do the same thing in post.
So the answer is you would prefer to do it in Photoshop or Lightroom rather than doing it using any kind of filter. Now, for those of you who don't know what a neutral density filter is, just real quick, it's basically a hunk of glass that you can put on the end of the lens of the camera. So you can get screw-on ones or you can get drop-in ones, so the bigger square ones with a holder that help put it in front of your lens, that literally cut down the amount of light that is coming to your camera's sensor. So basically what that can do is it can mimic low light situations. It can allow you to slow your shutter speed down even though you're working in broad daylight. And I'm pretty sure it's called a neutral density filter because all it does is affect the light value, but it does nothing for color. So
That's right.
it
Yeah.
doesn't change. And I think that's why if you get cheaper ND filters, they can actually stuff up your color. They create
can.
a color
Yeah.
cast.
That's
More
right.
expensive ND filters don't do that. So
Yeah,
I think the
that's
neutral part of it is there's no change to color.
Yeah, and the one thing I think people need to be a little bit careful about neutral density filters, they come in different variants as well. So you can get like a slightly tinted neutral density, almost to a pure dark tinted filter where you can barely see through it at all.
Yeah.
And the more, obviously, the darker the filter, the slower your shutter speed needs to slow down to get that shot.
And they talk about that, and they rate it in terms of stops. So you can have a 2-stop ND filter all the way down to a 10-stop ND filter.
Yeah, I love on workshops when people put, you talk about, because everything in photography is doubles and halves. So, one stop is, this, ISO 100 to 200 is one stop, 200 to 400, everything's doubling and halving in regards to that. So someone puts a 10-stop filter on and they're shooting at, 500th of a second. I say, well, let's do the maths. What's 10 stops slower than 500th of a second? And it's quite amazing how many people don't know how to divide by 2. So, yeah. But yeah, neutral density filters, one other thing is just be careful with, if you start doing super long exposures, like a couple of minutes or more, you can start affecting the contrast, and that color cast can start also starting to look a little bit whack, I like to call it. Sometimes makes the colors look a little bit off. And I think that's just a general characteristics of sensors being open so long and capturing light. So just be aware of that as well.
Unless your camera is really, really new, you shouldn't be doing that long exposure with a digital sensor anyway, because you're going to stuff it.
That's it. So, yeah.
Very,
cool.
very good.
Thanks, Phil from Esperance. We'll have to go there. Maybe we'll do a live show from Esperance.
Oh, can we?
We should. We're going to take this on the road.
Does the budget?
There's an idea.
Does the budget stretch to Esperance? At
Look,
the moment, it doesn't friggin' stretch to Barwon Heads from.
I was going to say, I don't know if it's the budget I've got to worry about. It might be the Minister of Finances we have to talk to.
No.
Can you imagine us two on a road trip doing a podcast around Australia?
There'd be concessions given left, right, and centre. Cam, they would have to come. They would have to. They can do.
The kids would have to come.
Nah, well, that's true. Yeah, this isn't going to work.
No, we'll stick to here.
If you've got a Dear Cam question, please type it below, or send it to us via Courier Pigeon. I think works at the moment. That'll get to us.
Yeah, that's good, man.
You can send it through our Facebook page or wherever.
Yeah, you can email it to me, cam@tazphoto.com.au.
Link in the
description. It'll all be in the link. It'll get
be.
to us somehow.
There will be. Now, you're going to find this hard to believe, but we've been banging on for a good 48 minutes or so.
Let's go.
So, have you got anything coming up that you want to discuss, Cam?
I've got a few things coming up. It's a bit of a funny period of time. There's workshops getting postponed and things all over the shop. But I've got.
Now, did I see you were involved with BFOP this year?
I am
as
involved
you
with
normally are, but
yes,
this year in
I am
particular?
involved with BFOP. Yes, that was something I was going to touch on.
Very
so, what is coming up? So, first things first, I got a weekend at Cradle Mountain this weekend, doing a couple of Olympus days and things like that. So we're up there for a couple of two single day workshop style events. But then after that, the next big thing is the Bright Festival of Photography, also known as BFOP. bfopaustralia.com.au. We have early bird tickets on until the 12th of September, which I think is Sunday this week. So what that is, it's a 3-day festival. Unfortunately, it's online. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, it's online. It's usually an in-person festival held in Bright, Victoria. This year, it's all online due to our friend COVID. What it is over 50 hours plus of instructors. So myself, and there's a heap of other amazing instructors that are coming on board. They'll teach all different genres of photography, all done online. You can sit in your living room with a cup of coffee or a few beers. Each night, after the sun goes down, we get online and do a few drinking games and a few muck around things online as well. So that's on from October 8 to 10. Tickets are on sale now at bfopaustralia.com.au. Get in before the end of Sunday because you get an early bird savings. We usually get like 400 or 500 people watching. It's incredible. So my part in that, I'm doing a quick lap, 3-day lap of Tasmania. So we're going to all these amazing locations and broadcasting live from the top of mountains, the edge of cliffs. We might even be in the middle of a tulip field this year.
What could possibly go wrong?
My hay fever. So yeah, get on there. It's an amazing experience. Hopefully next year we can get back up to Bright. We might if we get up to Bright next year, how's this for you're coming, Brendan, and we're going to do a live show from the Bright Festival of Photography.
I'm in.
Done. Lock it in, and they've got a brewery there, so that's all that matters.
When does it normally happen? Don't say footy finals time.
No, it's not. It's usually just after footy finals time. So
listen to me.
I know it's all about the footy. So that's what's going on. It'd be great to people get them online, and a lot of the content from last year was available online afterwards. I'm not sure if they're doing the same thing this year, but you can certainly get on. And Dennis Smith, who does all the light painting, is an absolute legend from South Australia. There's so many guys involved. It's really, really a good few days to get on board.
Yeah, I'll be getting myself a ticket, and I will sit in on a few of the workshops for sure. Looking forward to.
I expect to see your face on the screen then.
All right, consider it done. Can you comp me a ticket or?
Yeah, I might be able to. Yeah. I'll talk to you about it.
No, I pay my way. I'm fine with that. That's fine.
You're opening again. That's what's happening with you this week.
Yeah, so we I've lost track. I think we've been locked down for a couple of weeks. Really fortunate in some ways that Father's Day happened during that time because I was doing a lot of online orders for Father's Day. A lot of really cool portraits of dads with their kids and stuff like that, which was great. I really enjoyed doing that, framing them up and literally jumping in my van and delivering them to places around Ocean Grove, Barwon Heads and Torquay, which was brilliant, really, really cool. It was actually a really good distraction from everything that's going on. And I think one thing I forgot, and I've actually been working harder than ever over the last couple of weeks. And the reason for that is I've got no staff. I sort of forget that, that's right, I've got people that actually do this stuff with me as well. And but for the last couple of weeks, of course, we couldn't have had any staff on site. So it's been pretty full on. I'm to be honest, I'm knackered. It's a bit of COVID fatigue with actual physical fatigue. It's doing a lot of work, as I say, doing the work of 4 people really. Yeah. Over the last couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to getting the shops back open because nothing works better than face-to-face in my game. I love talking to people about, particularly people who come in with some really nice photography that they want to create, for example, as a canvas print or a framed piece of artwork on their wall. I love talking with people about the options for that. I've had a couple of people who are loyal listeners to the Down South Photo Show be in contact with me over the last week about different kinds of papers and stuff that we print on. I will be getting back to you in the next few days, so thank you for reaching out for that sort of stuff. That's been really cool. So if you guys are keen to talk to me about getting things printed on particular paper stocks and that sort of stuff, let me know. I can help you out. The other thing that hopefully now, like we said at the start, light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully now my workshops can be reintroduced. We're going to see how it falls with, dare I say it, vaccination passports or anything like that. We're going to see how it all works. I haven't run a workshop now for 18 months, and I'm really keen to get back into those. So that's what's coming up for me.
Cool. All positive stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. It's good to feel like the wheel's going to turn again. Because she's all seized up at the moment.
And a lot of people sort of throw a bit of muck our way, saying, you've had no lockdowns and stuff like that. But essentially, we sort of are still in lockdown because we can't come to Melbourne to catch up, or we can't go see family. We can't have customers come down here, so it's getting a little bit lonely on this island. We're lucky we can still go out, but I can't wait to start mingling with people and. Everyone's vaccinated, then woohoo, let's get the show on the road.
All 7 of you that live there must be sick of each other.
Well, we're all in the same house, so... So there goes all our Tassie listeners.
You've done it again.
I know.
All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Cam, great to see you again. We will be back onto our regular weekly schedule, I would have thought, for a little while now. As I say, sorry that we took a week off, but it was needed for all concerned. And I guess we will catch up with you for episode number 14 next week. Over and out. Perfect. Cheers, guys.
See you later.
Bye.